Hello, my astrology friends. My name is Makayla Davis. I'm an evolutionary and predictive astrologer, psychic medium channel, and spiritual empowerment coach. And welcome back to my channel. If you have not hit the like button or subscribe yet, please make sure that you do. Or if you want to stay until the end and see if you like this content, please hit the like and subscribe button at the end. So this is part two of a video about Uranus transits that I put out about a week ago. And I said I would come back and put out a video of Uranus through the houses. So if you haven't watched my video on Uranus and Aquarius transits, please watch that first because I do a really deep dive on, sorry, I have a piece of hair or something. I do a really deep dive on what Uranus transits will feel like in the natal chart or by transit itself, and also Aquarius to some level and degree. And yeah, so I go really deep into that, like what Uranus really is asking you as far as a planet, natal, and by transit. And so now I'm going to go and dive into what it means when it's transiting through the houses. Just know that transiting planets come from external events, situations, people, things. So the transiting Uranus is helping your natal placement in the chart to develop itself and to evolve. But it will transit through, the houses for several years at a time. And it kind of hones in on a specific area of your soul growth, a specific area of your life that's requiring some level of shift, change, evolution to take place, and comes in these like erratic, chaotic at times situations and people and so forth. But again, it's ultimately liberating and it's really freeing for an individual. And so I want you to get in that mindset when I talk about the transits through these houses that, yeah, some of the situations can be quite difficult to deal with, but ultimately it's a reflection of where you're at personally in your life. And so the more difficult or the more restrictive or boxed in or contained and oppressive you can feel under the Uranus transit, just as requiring you to take a deeper dive into discovering the authentic parts of yourself that you as an individual are not allowing to be free for expression. Okay. So that being said, I'm going to pull up my notes and we're going to talk about the first house, of course, right? So the first house is one of the major four crosses in the chart. And so when a planet crosses the ascendant into the first house, it's a very big deal. It's probably one of the more drastic and dramatic transits that you can have, especially with Uranus going through there. So these transits are only once in a lifetime, and not everybody is going to have Uranus crossing their ascendant. If you're a Taurus right now, you're a Gemini right now, you'll be experiencing that rising. And if you're an Aries rising, then you experienced that several years ago. But again, this is like a once in a lifetime transit, and so what's happening is Uranus is leaving the 12th house where life could have felt really out of control. And we'll get into more of the 12th house Uranus transit towards the end of this video. But now that it's crossing over the ascendant, there's this dramatic change into the individual. The individual is going to feel a real strong pull to assert themselves in a completely different way. And on the exterior level, it can definitely change somebody's appearance. This person can just start to lose a ton of weight rapidly, or decide to completely change their wardrobe and how they present themselves. Or, maybe they've had really long hair their whole entire life and they just like shave it off. They just like don't want to deal with it anymore. This can be like really impulsive behaviors that the individual is being drawn into experiencing because there's a need to free the self-expression, right? The sense of self. And anything with the first house is about me. It's a me thing, right? It's like, I want this, I do this, I'm going to do that. And so these erratic changes in the individual can at times burn bridges or make changes in the opposite house, the seventh house of other people and so forth, because the reaction from others, it can feel like off-putting, like to the people who are around you, like, whoa, you were never like this before, or oh, why are you being so erratic or impulsive, like, why are you being so just like outward motion, like, these things can just completely be of shock to the people around you. And this is why it's really important to watch the first video that I posted on this. But it's because Uranus is asking you to free yourself, essentially, of the expectations from others, and also your responsibilities where you don't want them anymore. Okay, this is going to also be squaring your 10th and 4th house if Uranus is crossing the ascendant. And so if you feel like, if you're not making those changes, and you're not making the changes when the impulse arises, or the need to go in a new direction arises, or the need to shove off like any type of responsibility that you feel is connected to others, and you're not taking more time to focus on your desires, right, and the directions that you want to go forward, well, life is going to seem like really boring and mundane, and it's going to get really frustrating for you as an individual. Okay, so you can also feel a lot of this in the body as well. So there could be like this electric current happening within the body, and the needing to change. And sometimes, unfortunately, if we're fighting it, that will manifest as accidents and so forth. Okay, so close calls, right? So if like you get physical injuries at one point, and even if they're minor, like pay attention to, maybe I'm suppressing something within my inner self, that this new direction that I'm not allowing myself to go in, right? I'm not allowing myself to take this sense of agency and to go into this new direction. That's when like accidents will occur outside of you, you know what I mean? And they can obviously be, not to scare people, but it can be very physical. Like this is the ascendant. This is like the physical manifestation of your body when you reincarnated onto this earth. It's your rising sign. It's so this is like a really big change for somebody, right? And it's really very important that you do take the opportunity to be a little selfish with your choices and the direction that you want to go in. And if you want to say no to things, and no to people, and no to responsibilities, and no to directions to go into, then do it. Then do it. Don't oppress your sense of self-expression in any way, whether that be changing your physical appearance, and maybe somebody is in a relationship with somebody who like is insecure that you want to start going to the gym, and you're like, listen, like I've been overweight my whole life, and now I want to start working out and taking care of my health. And maybe your partner's triggered by that because they're overweight too, and they're triggered by you going to the gym, right? And so you're like, I don't want to make my partner feel bad, or my partner's always saying, well, why don't we go out and do this, or why don't we go out and do that? If you're feeling that call to make that change for yourself, like you need to go ahead and do that. And yes, it might make other people again react also to you, but they're just reacting to your inner changes, and that's not your responsibility. That's why I'm saying throw off the responsibility dynamic going on, right? It's not your responsibility to soothe any insecurities that might arise and come up because you're deciding to go in a new direction, and ultimately your soul is just evolving and growing. Okay, so those things can happen in the first house. It's definitely very significant, very potent type of transit, and it completely will just change the way that the individual is now choosing to go in a direction in their life. Okay, so then we go to the second house, which, has to deal with our money and our assets, right? And our possessions, essentially. So there will be ups and downs when it comes to this area of life of your resources, right? Of what you have, your personal assets, and also like your possessions and so forth. But the deeper dynamic here, what happens is the soul is now reevaluating and coming into a more authentic sense of self when it comes to what does money like actually mean to me. What is the value of money to me? And there's a part of this soul that the part of this transition with the soul that really discovers what your time and your energy means for you as an individual, and where you're wanting to put that, right? Where you're wanting to put your own personal skills and resources and time and energy into these dynamics of life. And there's also a big thing that happens with the Uranus transit through the second house. It's like energy exchange. You might suddenly realize that you're putting out your energy and your skills and your talents that you possess into areas that don't feel authentic to you anymore, okay, and that don't allow you to become more free, essentially. So this could affect a money house if you're deciding that you don't want to be a carpenter anymore. I am really good with these skills, but I'm even better at pottery, right? And then you understand that like your value and your worth is not really but maybe you're a really good carpenter and you're making a ton of money doing that, but then all of a sudden you lose your business or something, right? Like something could happen, like where like the business just breaks down, or there's like a fire in the garage that you work out of or something, and now you're being forced to look at like what resources of money mean to you on a really deep level, and you've now been freed up from the ties of like running that business, and now you're sitting there and you're like, well, I need to make money, but do I still want to do it doing something that I'm not truly happy doing, or do I have these other skill sets and I can create a living doing that, right? Because I've lost all my money. So like what, like once you, and this has happened to me, like where, I completely like was just $0, like completely broke at one point, and money was just like, well, I just need to survive, and I had to like really reevaluate my relationship to money and the self-worth, and also how people tie their self-worth to their money and their possessions. That's another deep thing in the second house, like a Uranus transit to the second house. It's like, are you tying your authenticity to how much money you have, right? Or and money is not a bad thing. Like in my opinion, like I like to talk about winning money and how it's an energy exchange and how we're always living in abundance. And I, of course, like to make my own money and I like to make a lot of it, but there's been a learning journey through the worth dynamic, and that like ultimately, the amount of cash that you have and the amount of money does not equate to the self-worth of the individual. And so there can be a deep transition here going through the second house of like what matters and like what is worth pursuing and for what cost. Okay. And so there definitely can be a time of because Taurus, the second house, is a bit more physical as well. It's like the first earth energy in the chart, right? And the manifestation of that coming in. And so there can be ties to like, how do you feel? Just like the six will have these themes too, but how do you feel physically when it comes to investing, in yourself here in this area of life? So I think that individuals would experience definitely like highs and lows when it comes to like resources But it's not like it's just going to devastate you. Like, I'm not saying that like somebody experiencing this transit will feel complete devastation and like lose everything, you know what I mean? But I would expect somebody to have some ups and downs, because Uranus is just erratic and it can cause chaos, especially when we're like out of alignment with our true inner self. It's going to cause those eruptions and so forth, so that the individual can reorientate their relationship to their possessions and their self-worth and their values as well. So moving along, so when we go to Uranus transiting the third house, this is the house where we do a lot of communication, thinking, writing, talking, you know, speaking to one another, communication, and so forth. And this will be a transit that will encourage the individual to expand and open up their mind and think in new ways. And so, you know, somebody might have grown up in a very rigid household where their beliefs are pretty like dogmatic or religious or just rigid in general, or maybe narrow visioned. And Uranus transiting here is going to bring in a ton of new information for that person, that individual, to process and integrate into themselves, right? And so they'll process it through the left side of their brain, the part that takes in all of thoughts and ideas and communications and insights, and will start having that individual now think in a new way that they never thought of before. And then encourage that individual to now communicate their self-expression, to communicate through words and through speaking or writing and so forth, and opening up and expanding their mind. So it could be quite shocking to like their friends or their siblings, right? You know, well, you never thought like this before, type of thing. And you'd be like, well, now I do, you know? And these new ideas and these new visions that can come in can seem like they come out of nowhere, because essentially Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury, okay? And so it actually does store information from other lifetimes and other like realms and so forth. And so the more open that the individual becomes to maybe expanding their perspective or their perception of things, the more open they are to these erratic, quite eccentric, but also genius new ideas and thoughts. You know, they might come up with like this new way of this new game that is like incredibly, I don't know, mind altering and so forth, and like want to develop that game in a few years from now, you know. But it might feel like the individual during this transit is getting all these insights and is like feeling all this openness and receptiveness to internally to like these new ideas. And maybe they're learning something new. Maybe this person decides to take a course that is completely left out of field. You know, maybe they're like a really scientific human, and then all of a sudden they just decide to go into like deep humanistic psychology and like just explore like the more openness, you know, if you will, of emotional and psychological tendencies. And then this person starts to completely expand who they are mentally as a person, because they're learning new things, downloading new ideas, right? Having new concepts come in. And so this basically becomes a new invention of the self, of how the self like thinks and speaks and with peers and others, you know. And so I encourage people under this time too that, you know, it also can become a part of like telling your story and learning how to communicate your authentic story. One thing that's like coming to mind is maybe like this person was just left a Uranus through the second house transit, where maybe they had like an emotionally manipulative partner, and they maybe had all the resources, and this person had to leave this emotionally manipulative relationship And that also cut off their resources, right? And changed their money situation. And it was a very traumatic, Uranus can be trauma. It was a very traumatic experience for them because they had to start from the ground up again. But now Uranus transits into the third house, and maybe they decide to write a book about it. Maybe they decide to take, that those insights that they got, and now they're healing that part of themselves, and they're like, oh well, that really actually taught me a lot of life lessons about my self-worth and my self-growth and how far I've come as an individual, and maybe I need to show up now and express myself and tell the story. But at first you can be scared, right? Maybe the individual is scared to speak out, is scared to make a YouTube video and talk about their emotional abuse. Maybe they feel shame, and then they're learning through other channels and other information, right? They're consuming psychological new depth and growth that helps them liberate the mind to not be shameful, right? To not feel or think that way anymore. And in essence, then they're able to open up and speak and share their story and really liberate themselves as an individual and be like, well, this is what happened to me. This is my authentic story. Like, this is my truth. Essentially now I want to speak my truth. These are the type of things that can go on through the third house. But I think actually one of the biggest things here is about being able to communicate like how you are feeling, thinking, wanting to express yourself. And it's opening up that throat chakra in a sense. So then we go to the fourth house transits. And again, Uranus is going to cross over your IC. So this is like a really big, another really, really, really big transit for an individual to experience in their life. And when we cross the IC, we go back into this like inward time of our life where it's necessary for us to go within. And the fourth house deals with the family, the home, the roots, the ancestral roots. But it's also an emotionally psychological house because it deals with like your inner sense of security and emotional security. And one of the things I like to talk about in here is learning how to soothe yourself and learning how to nurture and take care of yourself. Of course, family is going to come into play. And so just to touch on that, there could be a lot of changes in the home when Uranus is in the fourth house. There can be people moving in, moving out of the home. There can be like an actual moving of the home itself. Or this didn't just come up as like renovation, and maybe like there's tension and complications going on because like you really need a second addition to the house to create another bedroom because like you've got 3 kids but you only have 2 bedrooms, or so forth. And like it's been like a maybe like a contention, right? Or confliction, and finally that that tension and of those arguments is just released, and all of a sudden like the resources become available to put the addition on or something. There can be also like sudden changes, like somebody finding out they were adopted, right? And like learning that, oh wow, like my ancestral roots is actually quite different than what I actually grew up thinking, and this is my foster family and I actually have a whole other family somewhere else. These things can come in as new information, and so forth. And another thing is this can be like an individual maybe coming out to their family, like hey, I'm like I'm gay, just like the first thing that comes to my mind. Or like I'm not Christian anymore. You could be coming out into your family and shocking your family, and your family's like, what the hell? Like, what? I had no idea. And that causes some, radical tension going on, right? In the ups and downs of the scale of the family dynamics and so forth. But this is like on a deeper level, always going to reorientate the soul to learn how to first off, probably spend some time alone, because I did talk a lot about like the need for isolation in the first video that I put out. with Uranus transits, that, you know, to come back to the self. And so there might be a need to retreat away from the family in order to learn how to reorientate yourself emotionally, or learn how to soothe and nurture and care for yourself emotionally. Okay. Because this is going to, ultimately, this transit will work itself towards the soul learning to liberate its feelings and emotional like conditioning from others, um, and reorientate the soul to be more emotionally resilient on its own. Okay. More independent, if you will, emotionally, and there build a stronger sense of emotional security for the self, which would allow the individual to feel more free, to be who they are. Because one of the dynamics that we can look at with the moon in the fourth house is that's how the soul sees itself through a lens. Okay. And so, like, really, the moon is like who you really are. I know the sun is like how we express ourselves, and it's our vitality and so forth. And a lot of people will see our sun sign, and it is a major player in the charts, one of the luminaries. But the moon is widely misguided as not being as important as the sun. And I would argue that it's almost more important, because if you're not nurturing your moon or taking care of your fourth house, or learning to be emotionally resilient and independent in certain ways, then you become a lot more open and susceptible to being hurt and misguided, throughout life, and trust dynamics and emotional security and so forth. And so what can happen here is, because Uranus can be associated with trauma and traumatic events and things changing erratically, that that can happen, uh, that can accelerate while the Uranus is transiting the fourth house. However, it's going to open up and invite in the human to investigate and reorientate itself to traumas that have been linked to the family, or not feeling emotionally secure in certain times of life and so forth. And what happens is this opportunity is now asking the soul to reintegrate, right, those memories, because the only way to actually heal trauma, and this is true from like a psychological perspective, is to reintegrate that into the ego's development. Because essentially, when you reintegrate that, you can now rewrite the story and re-empower yourself, by giving the story a different sense of truth. Okay. And one of the things about Uranus is opening up these levels of truth of the inner self, right? The inner individual. And so now these levels of truth can get opened up in this very intimate house, this very intimate, emotionally intimate realm of your chart. And it's inviting new levels of truth to be exposed, to come in, and for you to reintegrate and rewrite your own personal history. Okay. Because another thing is, you're leaving your own ancestral history now that you're alive and being human. So you get to reintegrate that and rewrite your own personal history. And essentially that will give you a deeper level of emotional freedom, where you're not as affected by these things anymore, right? You've released the pain, you've released the hurt, and liberated yourself from the heaviness that can come with these kind of dynamics. So then we go into the fifth house. And the fifth house is deeply oriented to like creativity and self-expression, love, romance, fun, children, you know, things that bring us joy. I think it's called the House of Joy in Hellenistic astrology. And this is where an individual will now discover different ways of self-expression, and it might dramatically change than what it used to be. And where the person will now feel called or be pushed into, you know, taking up a bigger space when it comes to your own self-expression, becoming larger than life. You know, if you've always wanted to, you know, sing in a band, right, this might be the time where like that musical artist is birthed, and they're now feeling the pull or the push or the pressure, if you will, to now step into that part of themselves, right? To now discover that part. This is when somebody might erratically and quickly start developing their own creative projects. They might start being like having new insights around creativity as well. And if they're already like a creative individual and already embarking on those things, or maybe they're an artist already, you know, their art might change. You know, they might just all of a sudden be going through these other ego development things where they're cracking open their heart chakra. They're learning that they actually love more than, you know, just painting nature landscapes. Like now I'm like, oh, I really love to paint people's pets, you know, like it's just like completely like different, you know, and then all of a sudden they shift their art, you know, and then it obviously would affect the 11th house where people perceive and their networks and groups, and maybe they're not scenic artists anymore. Now maybe they work with pet people, but we'll get to the 11th house and obviously in a little bit. So yeah, so their self-expression changes, and also like the things that they find joy and interest in can change. And you know, so it's like it's not that bad of a transit compared to like other houses. However, if that person has been hiding their self-expression, and they know they have this gift, they know they have this talent, or they know they have this interest and they really want to do it, you know, this transit might if they're not stepping into that and they're not freeing themselves up in this area of life, then they might, you know, feel cold-hearted and resentful towards people who do, you know, or they might start to like feel like they lose joy in it, or like, what's the matter anyway? Like, what's the purpose of this anyway? Like, I don't really want to be an astrologer anyway, do I? You know, and this like pessimistic type of energy can come in, because when we are not responding to Uranus transits, or when we're not utilizing them, you know, what happens is the feelings I talked about in the first video, where, you know, irritation becomes like a bigger theme, right? Or like the criticism of others, like, you know, again, let's go back to the artist thing, and maybe they want to paint pets now, and they look at and they go to this gallery and there's like all these other pet paintings, and they're like, oh, that person's like doesn't do this with the brush, right? And they can start to criticize because they're projecting onto the fact that somebody else is doing what they envision themselves and what they really want to do, right? And their self-expression and personal expression is not being seen, it's not being heard. In the 5th house, we need to take up space, so we need to be seen. And so this is a push for the soul to step into that and to say, yes, you can do that. Yes, your work and your creativity is valid and it's beautiful and it should be admired, and people will admire it. You just have to do the thing, you know. And so like, but then joys and interests can change as well. And then this can also be a transit where people are looking at their hobbies that aren't so great, and maybe like they're a really bad gambler, for instance, and now Uranus steps into that 5th house, and it's like, well, you like gambling, but you also like painting, but you can't afford the paint materials because your gambling is out of control. And so Uranus will start to step in and create, you know, like big losses, for instance, right? Big losses around the thing that is not healthy and holding the person back from like what their soul really wants to be doing. You know, the gambling might be like an unhealthy way of you know, a preconditioned self-soothing dynamic that maybe wasn't met yet when Uranus was in the 4th house, and maybe that slipped by and wasn't seen. Well, now it becomes even louder in the 5th house because they're using that gambling as a means to cope with what wasn't dealt with in the 4th house. And so, you know, you pull in some of that energy, and then Uranus gets a little bit louder, and it's like, well, now it's going to affect like the things that really make you happy. And it's like, are you free to do that? You know, those questions like, are you really free to paint when you want to? Or does your gambling addiction prohibit you from doing that, you know, and so forth. So then we go into the 6th house, which is so funny because I want to take a sip of my soda, and I don't drink soda a lot, but I was just feeling it's gonna be funny. Hold on one second. It's gonna be funny because of what I have to say about the 6th house, but cream soda is delicious. The 6th house becomes a lot about your health, a lot about your routine. And so what happens when the Uranus comes in the 6th is it's going to like really do a good innovation around your routine and health dynamics and changes to your diet and what's not allowing you to receive clarity. And so one of the things that I teach people when I do spiritual coaching with them and I'm working with them through their chakras is to understand that the root and also the food that we consume, which is the root and the solar plexus is connected because the solar plexus is where we make decisions. The food that we consume really changes the clarity level that the body is receiving. And I'm not going to sit here and tell one kind of diet is perfect for everybody, or, I'm a pescatarian personally. I don't think that's the right choice for every single body. I think people need to eat according to their soul, to their chart, to their blood, to their human design. And that can be a trial and error process. And, the more specific and the more time you put into figuring it out, the better you're going to get at understanding what your specific soul and body needs to receive, okay, to run itself properly. And so Uranus transiting here is going to bring up a lot of dynamics because the soul's like, okay, it's time to look at health and wellness and diet for you specifically, and what we're feeding it and what it's taking in and how it's being affected. And so things like erratic and like weird digestion issues, like maybe you were able to eat cheese your whole entire life and you had no problem with it, and now all of a sudden, like every time you eat cheese, it's just like doesn't settle well. Those things happened to me when Uranus was going through my 6th house. Was like I was not able to eat certain things anymore without completely getting inflamed. And then I went vegan, pescatarian, and so forth. And so, these things will happen. And the issues and the insights around your health is going to help you so that you can actually, sorry, my dog keeps dropping his toy. Mental clarity, okay, and then the mental clarity that comes within this, and it becomes very precise because we're in the 6th house here. You'll become acutely aware and very sharp. If you can open yourself up and be open to changes that need to be made, then that also helps you with your day-to-day routines, okay? And that's one of the other things that can get affected now, because now, okay, now I need to know, I know I have to go to the gym every day, so I need to make an hour and a half every day of my life to maintain my health and my wellness and my gut health and my clarity in my mind and how I feel about myself. And confidence comes into the 6th house as well, okay? How I feel like I'm proficient in my life, proficient in taking care of myself daily, and those around me who are affected by my daily health and wellness. Those things become of deep clarity as this transition begins, okay? And as it goes through that. So, if you are in a position where you work for others, because in the 6th house we can find subordinates or we work under other people, this might be a time where you don't want to do that anymore. Like you don't want to be a part of the team, or you feel like you want a promotion, or you feel like you need to be in charge more, and so forth. And then you can see sudden disruptions, like with how you feel like you're providing your services and how you're being of service and skillful help to others, either in your work environment or maybe your neighborhood or maybe like a team that you're a part of or something. Those changes can also be felt within the soul, where you feel like you can help things better, right? You can see a change, you can see a shift, because Uranus can give those insights to like how the system isn't working and so forth. And so there's this dynamic where like you see the improvement in a different way than people around you are seeing it. And so there's a need to step into like your abilities to be of service in that way. And so that's where the confidence will come in, because Uranus again is going to really try to boost the confidence level in this area of life and so forth. And so I really want to give a special like insight though. Like health to me is the deeper underlying layer, like because how you're taking care of your health is actually, and this is something I completely learned through my own journey, personal journey, like really deeply. When you really do take care of your health, and I'm saying like drinking the water, knowing what your body needs as diet, knowing what kind of movements you need to happen, like that's when like the shifts around you start to manifest. And that's why the Uranus transit will bring a freedom to your daily life, like a freedom and a flexibility. Because if you're not addressing that, then you can become very sick and bogged down. And like, this is just a girly issue, I'm just going to say, right? But like, if you're not maintaining your gut health and Uranus is in the 6th house and your gut and your stomach is all of a sudden giving you all these issues and you're feeling bloated all the time, well, you don't feel good in your clothes. You don't feel confident going out, right? You don't feel confident standing up in front of a work setting and giving a presentation, right? You don't feel those things. But when you do, and then you freed yourself because Uranus was honing in on what your body specifically needs, then you feel like you have freedom and flexibility to get up in the morning. I feel good. I feel confident. I can wear whatever I want. I have no problem speaking in front of people because my self-image and my confidence level is completely different now. And so all of these things get affected, right? And so that's why I think health is the number one layer here. And it's also going to like help your animals and stuff, right? Because small pets and animals fall into the 6th house too. And so I stopped feeding my dogs dog food like a long time ago, but that's because I had started my own meal prep journey. And I was like, if I can meal prep for myself, like I can feed my dogs like rich, real chicken, rice, potatoes, green beans, peas, carrots, pumpkin. Like I can do that too for them, right? They don't need to eat this stuff out of a bag, which I have a very strong opinion about dog food. I think it's awful for dogs. So their health completely shifted when my health completely shifted. And they're the 2 most healthiest dogs. Every time I bring them to the, knock on wood, bring them to the vet, they're like completely no issues. So anyway, it does affect your fur babies too if you have them. And also your kids, your kids, if you're, part of your responsibilities, your day-to-day responsibilities falls in the 6th house. And so if you're a parent, and you're just eating TV dinners every night, but it's really effing up your personal health. Well, imagine how your kid's feeling, how your kid's growing up, no offense, but we know these things aren't like the best, like preservatives and high sugar content and stuff, like the basics, right? We know that that's not healthy for like all humans. So anyway, so now we cross into the 7th house, which is another angle, another big angle. And so this one is like really, really profound and deep because this is when you start to see your relationships in your life change and shift. And because the 7th house is about relating, it's about relationships, it's about connecting, it's about listening, observing, mirroring. And so this is when an individual will experience people coming and going out of their life. And this is personal relationships. So best friends, close friends, partners, marriage partners, um, counseling clients, one-on-one clients, if you're a coach or you're a personal trainer or something, business partners can come fall in this category to some level too, although mostly 8th. But this is where, again, the burning of bridges can be happening, but because your sense of self and your relationship to how people relate back to you will be changing. Okay. And so here you'll be learning like to say no to people. And again, like the first house, but in a sense, it'll be because you're learning about respect and you're learning about boundaries with other people. And so you might now feel like you're in partnerships or relationships that don't respect like who you're becoming, or your sense of self-worth is changing, or your respect is changing. And so you can experience, you know, betrayals and mistrust and the uprooting of other people in your life during these times. But because it's like you're upgrading your relationships, and you're upgrading the type of relationships that maybe you were priorly conditioned to go through and receive, and now those dynamics and your way of relating to others is required for change. And so like the bigger question here becomes, you know, what is my cost of freedom with this person? You know, does this person allow me to be free, or do I feel suppressed in this relationship? Do I feel oppressed in this relationship? Do they allow me to be my authentic self? Do they listen to my opinions? Do they listen to, you know, how I feel? And are they mirroring that same respect back at me? Like, am I doing that for other people? And so ultimately here, you're going to learn a lot about who you are and how you show up in relationships. And, you know, if you're not allowing that freedom for other people, then it's most likely being reflected back at you, that they're not allowing that same self-expression to be reflected for you as well. And so you'll start to feel this tension, like this snapping, this breaking, or this exiting need for sudden change, or this sudden need to like get out of the relationship, or, you know, get out of the friendship, or so forth, you know. And again, like when we are not vibrating with Uranus transits and how they're asking us to expand ourselves and to upgrade, and to individuate more, then again we can feel judgy towards others. We can judge other people's actions, or the close people in our life, and so forth. And so that'll be a clear hint to you that, you know, maybe this is a me thing. And it's like, I mean, we all go through it. And right now I'm literally experiencing this transit, and it was a huge lesson, a huge upgrade, you know, that I learned a lot through a prior engagement that needed to end, and like wasn't ultimately healthy and felt very restrictive. And it got to the point where, you know, it felt like the tension, like the need to break free, like would be literally when that person came home. Like I would immediately, my body would start rejecting that. And so when the relationships aren't healthy for you anymore, they're not going to help you evolve, and they're feeling stagnant, you know, like there's a need for that to either evolve, right? Either evolve and transcend. And it's likely that you're going to be experiencing these things through the other people in your life, because seventh house says we experience life through other people and so forth. Or you can experience betrayals from the other people and so forth, because ultimately this transit is teaching you about your own self-respect and your own self-worth. And it's Venus qualities. Like, so what are you willing to deal with when it comes to your relationships? And, you know, is this allowing you that ultimate freedom that your soul would enjoy in these certain partnerships? So it's not to say that every relationship will end during a seventh house Uranus transit, because that's not true. Not everything is going to fall apart. There were times when I didn't speak to certain family members for a little bit because of a difference of opinions. And there was space, because there can be space with Uranus transits being taken place. But that was what it was. It was space being taken. And then we got back together. We both, you know, had our time apart, you know, looked at our insights, and then came back together. And with time and that, you know, that breath of fresh air, and like that lack of like feeling the control from somebody else, like just that general space being taken place allowed me and said family members to come back into agreements and alignments, and then everybody was able to listen and listen to hear each other and accept each other's for our individual sense of self. And one of my favorite things to say about the seventh house is just agreeing to disagree. And like sometimes that literally can be just Uranus teaching people to reach that level of self-acceptance for the individual and for the self, and that's really what gives freedom in a relationship too, is like, okay, you're different from me, I'm different from you, and we both see each other, hear each other, listen to each other. Seventh house, accept one another as individuals, and then the mending can take place and Uranus can move along. Okay, just know that it's really normal to experience this flux, like this ups and downs, this in and out, when Uranus is transiting the seventh house and impacting relationships. And if they do fall off, they do break away, then you're accelerating growth. You're accelerating growth. And the other person can't accelerate as fast, or they're not ready to accelerate as fast with you. But do not hinder your own personal growth or your own personal freedom, okay, for the sake of trying to people please. Because this is one of the things that Uranus in the seventh house is also going to eradicate, is any form of people pleasing that is not healthy or individual for the soul's chart. Okay, it will cost too much freedom. Going into the eighth house is more intense, and it will require deeper soul growth. And it's a quite complex transit, because again, you do meet dynamics with other people, because here you deal with intimacy of life, sex, taxes, business contracts, joint finances, and your deep psychological undercurrent in the eighth house that's really rooted to other people, right? That's really rooted to your personal relationships, your family, and the collective, and the oneness of everything, all together. So, this becomes a time to heal like memories. And if you watch my new moon in Aquarius video, it's actually quite educational on Aquarius and its association with trauma and how we can heal trauma. And in the eighth house, this can be one of those transits where, okay, the soul is now ready to unearth and heal a lot of the emotionally deep and psychologically deep trauma that's happened to the individual, or maybe that's happened to their parents that they passed down to that individual, and so forth. And so there comes like a cracking and an opening, right, of the depth of your soul. And so that's going to expose vulnerability, and issues around being vulnerable, okay? Especially issues around being vulnerable to trust. And so this starts to invite you in to look at the layers of like, who do I trust and why do I trust them, right? Or why do I not trust them, right? Or why can I not be vulnerable? Or maybe why am I too widely open vulnerable? These undercurrents are now being cracked open to be looked at deeper. And so issues can come up where if you have not really learned how to trust the right people, and now you realize that your business partner is stealing from you, and or coercing behind your back, right, in negative ways, right, and now you start to that starts to be shown to you, because what Uranus does is it exposes the truth, right? And so if you or somebody else has been misaligned and not acting with integrity and authenticity and truth, then these things become exposed, and then that causes a sense of betrayal and a sense of hurt, and that causes a trauma, right? Because the person has to process that. They have to do something with that emotion and that event and how it made them feel, and they have to store it somewhere in their brain. Like, this is actually how the brain works. But when it becomes a very painful situation, like a situation that's just too painful to emotionally deal with, and it doesn't have a safe place to regulate or to decompress, right? This is why therapy under these transits would be really great, or having a good friend or a psychologist or an astrologer to help you process these things, because then the soul is now having to learn about the dynamics of what it means to trust. Okay. And ultimately, I think trust and being vulnerable are extremely healthy things that we just need to relearn as individuals, and then often becomes misaligned and misplaced because our bottom chakras aren't working well, right? Where we don't feel grounded and we don't feel safe in our own sense of emotional security, right? The stuff we talked about in the fourth house. And then we also vibrate on a different level of self-worth. That would be your sacral chakra. And so what you're vibrating, if you're not vibrating at a high level of self-worth, then you're vibrating out an energy to attract predators or people who are going to betray you to come in and teach you those lessons about self-worth and respect. Right. And then you go to the solar plexus, and then those are their choices. That's where you make your choices and so forth. Right. And so what happens with this eighth house transit, it's kind of like a combination. It's a test of the pillar of all of this deep psychological, hopefully dynamics that you've built for yourself. And then it's okay if they're not all steady or strong. Like Uranus is going to test this, right? It's going to test the emotional, psychological foundation of your ability to actually experience intimacy with life. And so you learn a lot about trust here. You learn a lot about what it means to be truthful, and what it means for other people to be truthful, right? And so Uranus kind of will remove these people, these scenarios, these situations for you, because when we don't feel like we can be honest, when we don't feel like we can be vulnerable, when we're with other people and we're attaching ourselves, because there's an attachment dynamic that happens in the eighth house, and Uranus is coming in here to detach anything that's not a healthy attachment. Okay. It's going to detach anything that's not healthy attachments. And that is going to allow you as an individual to feel more free. Okay. Because if you feel safe, then you feel you're safe enough to feel like you can be free. Right. But if you're not feeling safe, then Uranus is going to come in here and test that. Okay. And be like, okay, well, you don't feel safe with this person. So here's the truth. Here's the exposure. Here's the betrayal. Here's the sense of vulnerability that made you feel really unsafe, right? Did you feel good here or did you not, right? Uranus is going to come in and be like, is this allowing you to be completely you, completely free, completely trusting? And if it isn't, like, let's remove that. Okay. And that's why we can experience, again, I don't want to scare anybody, but this is a very real thing, the death of things, right? The death of maybe, you were abused by a parent your whole life. And now that transit comes in and there's a death to that parent. And yes, is it painful and hard? And there's mourning and grieving and everything and so forth. Yes, but now your soul might feel like you're able to actually feel free and process all of the abuse dynamics and so forth, and not feel that sense of attachment to that person anymore because they've left the earthly plane. Like Uranus can come in and free you like that. It's going to look like different scenarios, right? Or it might cut off that business partner. Like there might be like, I don't know, say you have like I don't know much about stocks, but say you have like a stock with somebody you co-own, and like there's a huge crash, you guys lose everything, but that partner was stealing from you anyway, or causing like bad, nasty tax things for you anyway, right? And you didn't want to be in that business anyway, and now you have a clean slate. Did you lose a lot of money? Yes, but now you're freed up to just pick a new partner or just go on your own, right? And do that in a new way. And so that's why like death can come under these transits too, like either physically or metaphorically. Those things can be experienced in order for the soul to be able to become feel more safe in its vulnerability and learning to trust and essentially feel free at the end. So then we go into the ninth house. And the first thing is like, okay, you come out of the eighth house transit, that's pretty rough, right? And so there's a little bit more of like a fun atmosphere with Uranus through the ninth house, right? And it's a little less heavy. And if you think about it, it's like Sag energy, it's a little more buoyant, ninth house theme. So all of a sudden this person might have a new perspective, a new philosophy of life coming in, and it's just like, it's just consuming them. You know what I mean? Like suddenly their personal truths have completely changed because of all of the insights that they have had, you know. And so they just like kind of feel like reborn essentially of like their belief system overall, you know. And then the belief system reorientates the direction that they want to go in their life. You know, I don't believe in that anymore. Like I don't believe in um monogamous relationships anymore because I was betrayed and I learned about self-trust, and now I trust myself so much to pick a partner. Now I can be in polyamorous relationships, right? That's like somebody's belief system. That's a ninth house thing. They will orientate their life around their certain beliefs. That stuff can happen. You know, things about politics can fall into the ninth house. You know, maybe they're a hardcore Republican, you know, and then all of a sudden they're like, I don't know, just hardcore Democrat. Like they just completely switch political positions and so forth. There also could be like a strong need to travel to foreign countries or international countries because this human is all of a sudden seeking higher truth, right? Higher perspective, higher knowledge. And so the way to do that is to indulge themselves and to open up themselves and expand themselves to other schools of thought, right? Other religions, like other people's truths and the way they live, and just experience something completely culturally new, right? They either might do a couple of big, you know, big, long pilgrimages to certain places, or they might want to like go study under a monk for a year, you know, and take a course of study that's completely new and different. Or maybe they just want to actually move to a different foreign country and they're just like had it and they're like, I just want to uproot and leave. And so there can be a feeling of restlessness to where that person is at culturally, philosophically, with knowledge and so forth. And they also might decide to, you might decide under this transit to expand your knowledge that you've already built. You know what I mean? Like a higher education, a higher degree, getting your doctorate and so forth. But really, the deeper thing about here is basically cracking open like your insights and releasing any kind of dogma, because a little we can have dogma, a bit of us I think can have a sense of dogma at times. Some people are more open than other people, but this will be kind of like a cracking of the mind and also a cracking of the right side of the brain as well, right? Because it's opening yourself up intellectually and creatively and to some level and degree too, so that more opportunity can open up and arise for you, right? So there's this sense of optimism that can come, these new horizons. But again, if the person is resisting anything like this, and then they might feel that sense of dogma a little stronger, or judgment against other people who are going and straying away, and like, you know, that just the religion thing comes back to me, and they could just be like, internally they could be feeling like maybe they don't align with like Christian beliefs anymore, but they're feeling like they're a bad Christian because like they don't, oh, like a nun, for instance, right? Like say a nun has committed herself like her whole life, and all of a sudden, like on the inside, she's like, I don't effing want to be a nun. Like I don't want to do this shit. But she's judging herself, right? She's judging herself because that's all she's known. That's what she's grown up with. That's what she's been devoted to. And now she's stifling, she's going through this knowledge and truth dynamic internally within herself, and like it's just needing to shift, it's needing to expand and change, so the irritation can come in, right? The judgment can come in. And so when we're feeling that, that is a direct link again, like, okay, I'm not opening myself up and I'm judging my inner self and my inner individual truths, right? And it's going to take a little bit more work to get there and to actually liberate the self psychologically, essentially. So then we go into the 10th house, which is a big transit again, because it's the last angle that Uranus can cross. And so the changes happening up here in the 10th house while it's crossing the MC is going to be more, while Uranus is crossing the MC, is going to be a lot more noticeable, to the public, because anything happening in the 10th house is how people see us, how we expose ourselves to the public realm. Please excuse me, I need another sip. So we essentially talk a lot about work in the 10th house and career, and so forth. And there is a level of also emotional responsibility and integrity and achievement. So I want to make sure I hit on those points. But the first thing is there can be a need to change professions, right? And again, you can see how that could be built on what happened in the 9th house transit. And now Uranus crosses the 10th house, and there's a need to change the job. There's a need to change the direction of the life. Maybe all of a sudden this person like had a CEO role, and they are now like laid off. Like we don't actually, I don't know what company wouldn't need a CEO, but just an example, we don't need, we don't need you anymore, and now you can retire, right? Or you could go do what you wanted to do, right? There could be a change in your work and your work image and how you're seen. You can all of a sudden seem like restless in your job. And so you could just start to manifest like not showing up on time or not being as responsible in your role, right? And so other people are going to perceive you as like being erratic or being irresponsible, or something's up with this person. And it's because as an individual experiencing this, like you're actually becoming emotionally new. Like the 10th house is an emotional house, right? But it's how we parent ourselves, it's how we take responsibility for ourselves. So if Uranus is transiting here, we need to take responsibility for the fact that something outside of ourselves, our sense of responsibility or devotion, or commitment to something we once were committed to, is shifting, it's changing, it's feeling like you don't want to do it anymore. And that needs to be validated and needs to be looked at, and so this person can just take a different job overall. They can decide they just don't want to be a parent anymore. When we see those like tough stories of like just parents just leaving and stuff, like they are like, I actually didn't sign up for this, and I can't be a good parent, and so forth, and just decide that they don't want the responsibility anymore. And then that also changes how people perceive that person, for better or for worse, whatever. Your reputation can change, right? Essentially with Uranus coming in the 10th house. And again, how we're responding to it and how we've decided to live up to our own personal truths, expectations of ourselves, and also like ability to allow ourselves to create an authentic life up until this point. Like that's also going to dictate the new possibilities that will come in. And there will be new possibilities that can come in that are good and that are buoyant and that are exciting and that are new and revolutionary. But this transit can seem quite rebellious to other people. It can seem like the new directions and the changes that you want to take when it comes to your commitments, and when it comes to things that you've worked at for a long time and taken a long time to just do forever, or levels of that responsibility, it can look like different stuff to everybody else, and so there has to become associated with these changes. There's also a test of like your emotional your emotional maturity, right? Your ability to stick up for yourself, or take control for your life, but also know that there's some things you can't control, right? But ultimately, this will explore different avenues, and you will just look different to other people. And again, it's almost like the first house, but there's a square here to the Aries Libra axis. So there's a pressure and there's a shift and there's like a push or a pull to change. And so that's going to change the dynamics of the people around you. And so we just need to understand that for whatever reasons, the shift isn't working. It's not working for you anymore. It's not allowing you to climb the ladder, right? Like say you've got a lot of responsibility in a role, but like you really know if you move to this department, you're gonna, you know, you're gonna be happy, you're gonna make more money, but you're afraid to leave the team that you've been with for 15 years because everyone loves you and they depend on you, but you can't take it anymore. And the society and the expenses are changing, and like the price of live is changing, and your family's depending on you, but then also your commitment to these people from 15 years is depending on you. And so you're stuck at this crossroads and you're like, well, do I take this new position or do I stay with the people? But if you stay with the people, you might get resentful, right? And if you, you know, and so you might get resentful of that, and you're like, my family suffers, or I'm not able to upgrade my life the way that I want, and so forth. And so you might meet like a situation like this, right, where there's like disappointment to some people, because they're like, I can't believe you're changing. You know, and you're like, but I need to. And this is my journey, I need to change, right? So I just want to express that it's difficult. It's a really difficult transit to go through, because emotionally we can be responsible for others, but just know that when we need to shift for ourselves and then that triggers off something in somebody else, you're also helping their own emotional growth at the same time, right? And so it might seem painful, like a painful decision or a triggering decision, or it might seem like a really risky decision, because Capricorn doesn't really like risk unless it's like really calculated, right? And it knows it's going to get what it wants. Capricorn 10th house. And this might seem risky, but Uranus is a risky planet. Like Uranus is not caring what your plans are. So it's like, well, maybe take the job, because your resentment might build and your unhappiness and your judgment might start to manifest now. All those negative things I talked about, again, watch the first video I put out on Uranus. That all might manifest and come out, and then you might get fired. Like, you know, so it's like, you got to know, you got to really deeply explore here. Where do I need to free myself up? Or what choices can I make in this area of my life that can free myself up and allow myself to expand and to have that more freedom in my life? Okay. And step into that. And then we go into the 11th house, which is like, Uranus is more comfortable here. Okay. So because like the 11th house is associated with Uranus and Aquarius. So, you know, I would say like this is like a little bit more of a comfortable house for Uranus to be in. But again, the sign that it's in will change, or the sign, or the sign that rules the 11th house will change for everybody. And then again, it doesn't mean that it can be an easy transit either. So this is about like your vision and your goals, and the people that help you to get there, right? The people, the groups, and the things that you associate yourself with, to help you get there. And there is a tie to money as well in the 11th house, because we are always collaborating and living with other people. Yes, we can have more individual jobs, more individual lives. We can be a one-man show, but you need people in this world to make money and to live and to help each other and so forth. And so 11th house is never going to be eradicated, right? So it's necessary. And so this is like where we meet our hopes and our wishes and dreams. And so when Uranus starts to cross into this house, this is probably when those things change, right? The path that you thought you were on is not feeling like it's the path anymore, right? You're feeling pushed to go somewhere else. You know, you could have been so dedicated to cleaning up the oceans and like a career of that for so long, and now it's just not your thing anymore, right? And it can feel like inauthentic, like this is who I was my whole life, right? I always cared about the oceans, I always cared about this and that, but all of a sudden, you know, Uranus transiting here can redirect your vision of what you see like a clean, healthy planet to look like. You know, maybe it's like, I care about the deserts, like you know, it's just completely erratically different or change, or it could have to do with none of that whatsoever at all, you know. And this will also be where, because your visions or like your opinions, you can meet a lot of opinions in the 11th house, they can change. And so they might not align anymore with the groups that you were once involved with, right? And so you can start to feel your sense of self wanting to either pull out of certain associations or groups or networks that you used to be heavily involved in, or you could experience the alienation that can come with Uranus transits, where they start to push you out of the group, and you're like, what do you like? And they're like, you just don't fit in anymore. You just don't fit in here. And we need to have trust when we're having Uranus transit through the 11th house, that either a new hope, a new vision, or new groups of people will be available to us, because they will be. We just have to free ourselves up from the things that aren't working in order to find those new tribes, right? Or those new goals. And so here is like a transit where the sense of the future looks different, that long-term goal of becoming a vet, right? Like you could be on your last leg of vet school, and then all of a sudden it's like, I don't want to put animals down, right? Like it could just solidify into you that like that's not that one thing, that one value, that one opinion, right? That one thing of being a vet changes inside of you. Uranus crosses that 11th house, and you're like, I can't spend the rest of my life having to do that. Like, that's not what I want my future. I don't want to grieve every time. This would be like, this is how I would probably feel being a vet, right? Like, I would love to be a vet, but I can't handle that, right? So, this storyline would probably be true for me if that was my soul. And it's like, it can be like this erratic thing, this erratic insight or this opinion about something that changes the vision that you had for your future. And so now you're here exploring different avenues of what that was going to look like for you. And again, it will shift the people that you've spent time with, the group dynamics and so forth, and people who you resonate with, who you align with, who you feel like you can be yourself around. Because ultimately you want to, and not all of them will change. Hopefully there's a lot of groups or people, situations in your network that are okay with you changing no matter how you change. I think that the astrology community is very much like that. The spiritual communities can be very much like that, where we're like, yeah, we know Uranus is going into your 11th house and you're being a little different, and maybe you were an evolutionary astrologer and now you're a Vedic astrologer, like just as an example. You can find groups of people that can shift and adjust as you evolve and change. But just know that there will be some feelings of what it feels like to be alienated or pushed out, or have to alienate yourself and push yourself out of different groups and dynamics. And the people who really want to create the vision with you to create the future that you see and that what you're hoping for. And then we go into the 12th house finally. So glad my battery is not dead yet. And this is, the 12th house is tough because we have to learn how to surrender. And we have to know that we are a part of a bigger tapestry of life, and we are a part of the entire collective of human beings, human consciousness, the animal kingdom, the planetary spheres, the universe. And it's a really wide concept to just open up to. And so there is a need to just surrender, rest, and relax and sit in that. And actually, as I'm kind of picking up on the 12th house vibe right now, I'm feeling a sense of nausea. And so I think that for those who start to have a 12th house Uranus transit, it can bring up a sense of nausea, right? Of like, oh my God, I really don't have control over anything. And insecurity or nervousness. And that can be really hard and difficult for an individual to release themselves from, to trust that they're actually going to be taken care of by the universal womb, and that the universe is not bad or out to get us, that ultimately we're here to learn about love, how to be a loving individual, and to learn how to trust in the love of the universe, and that we will be taken care of like that. And so it's a very deep transit to go through, and it requires the individual to start to open up, right? To surrender and to open up themselves. So there can be an overwhelming feeling as well that starts to happen, like where you feel like you're connected to the pain and suffering of things, or you can feel like you're connected to the joy and the liberation of things. Okay. And I imagine that there'll be ebbs and flows during this transit, which is going to require the individual to, again, release, let go of doubts, of insecurities, of fears, of toxic patterns of behavior, of self-undoing, and start shedding and shedding and shedding. And so that initial feeling of that nervousness, of that nausea and so forth, of course, that is going to be quite normal. Okay. But the more you learn to trust yourself, okay, because Uranus transits is about learning that self-trust within yourself, and that higher power, the more you can learn to feel free enough to relax and trust, the more at one you're going to feel during this 12th house transit. Okay. And the more nurtured and cared for in the womb of the universe of what it is, the more you'll be able to relax here. And so I imagine that, things can feel out of control and chaotic at first when there's resistance being met and so forth. And there will be, a little bit of an up and down shift or whatever, but eventually it will start to subside as your soul is basically shedding, right? It's like it's shedding anything that's heavy, that's weighing it down, that's toxic, that's not spiritually serving the soul's growth and learning the deeper layers of universal love and ultimate love and trust. Okay. Because remember, unless you're nearing the end of life, Uranus in the 12th house will feel quite different, right? Think about it, like the end of life, you're having that to the, you're 80 something, and you're having your Uranus return, and say it's going through the 12th house, and you're sick, and you're dying and so forth, and that need to surrender to that love, that trust, that letting go of everything can be quite different meaning than, and the purpose of that, right? The purpose for that soul to experience that towards the end, than opposed to somebody who's having maybe their midlife crisis, or they're in their 30s, and Uranus is transiting the 12th house, and it's going to still in their lifetime cross the ascendant. And that's when we got into the first house, right? Because when you cross the ascendant in the first house, Uranus again is encouraging the soul to be completely and erratically free, to just go in a new direction, to change their life. It's a once in a lifetime transit, but we're not going to be able to do that unless we've released a lot of the baggage that can be held on to. And there's no greater place to do that than in the 12th house, because anything that's released there ultimately goes back to Mother Earth. It gets recycled, it gets reborn, it gets cleansed, it gets renewed. Okay, the energy gets renewed. And so feel free to dump your baggage off in that house. Like, feel free to let go and release, and not worry about where those trash bags are going, because they're going to a higher power. They're going to a higher purpose. They're being cleansed and they're being recycled. So really, we can let go in the 12th house. We can let go of our fears here, and this is like a little off, but not really. Just like to finish this 12th house story, Uranus is in Taurus, and Taurus rules my 8th house. So I'm experiencing those 8th house dynamics, but it's still in the 7th. So I'm also doing a little bit of 7th house work. Okay. And I was afraid of coming out and talking about my time in sex work, and being a sex worker, and I have progressed moon in the 12th house, and I just released those fears. Like, I was just like, you know what, I'm putting this in a pink garbage bag, and I am just tossing that over there, because I am so sick of just like not being able to express myself. And I trust myself, and I trust that I've brought in the right people and supportive dynamics and so forth, and I'm building the right platform where I'm vibrating at a level that I surrendered those fears, you know, I gave them up. And so that's just like an example of what you can do with Uranus going through the 12th house. It's it's enlightening. It'll be enlightening. And also like your psychic abilities, like the 8th house too, and the 4th house, but your psychic abilities can really be transformed, really be heightened. You can become extremely intuitive, like really intuitive during this kind of transit. And so that can be an incredible gift as well, where you can you know, channel, transcend messages, connect to the other side of the life itself, work with higher guides directly. You know, these really beautiful talents and gifts can come in and really change your sense of surrender, what it means to surrender and let go, and freedom, and ultimate freedom. So anyway, let me close out my notes. I hope that was helpful. So that was a lot to cover. And again, if you have not watched the other video, please do, because it's going to talk more about like what it feels on a deeper level. And yeah, so I hope that was helpful. Please feel free to share this video with other people, share it on your social media, on your platforms. It would help my channel grow. And you never know, it might help somebody who's going through a Uranus transit and they need help understanding it better. Please like and subscribe as well. That of course helps my channel grow, and leaving a comment also helps. So maybe you can you know, look back at your chart and see, you know, how it's showing up for you, what house it's in, what's resonating, or maybe what house it just left, and what was your experience when it transited that period of your life, and so forth. So stay on the lookout. Make sure you're giving me a follow on Instagram. I'm posting updates about what's coming ahead for us. And you know, I'm going to be back here soon. I hope to do some horoscopes because I think that's going to be fun. And I am definitely covering the eclipses and so forth coming up. But make sure you're subscribed here. Make sure you're just subscribed on Instagram so you can get all the updates. Again, good luck with your Uranus transits. You're going to be fine. You know, you're going to be fine. You're loved. You're taken care of. You're the womb of the universe loves you. So thank you again for staying here, and I will talk to you guys soon. Okay, ciao.